This is the March 22nd interview with Ruth Hawley. She's almost 92 years old. She's talking about her memories of her life. And in the last interview, she talked about how she got married to my dad, Rex Hawley, in Salt Lake City. And 2 weeks after they were married, he got his orders to be shipped overseas. And so she's going to talk about her life after as a newlywed, living apart from her husband, moving back to Pasadena, and what was going on there. So, and the start of the war. So Dad put you on the bus, and you went back to Pasadena.
Then I went home because that was the only way that my folks would even consider doing. Anybody else with any sense would have joined the military and got in on the good things of the military. But no, I had to go home. And, of course, I was taught to mind, and that's what I did. However, it wasn't all that bad. I enjoyed living with my folks. They were very kind to me and good. However, I had to fork over. I made $15 a week, but I had to give them $5 a week for my share of the expenses of running the house, which that's all they had. They had to have it. And Russell paid $10 a week, so they got $15 a week. And they paid $28 a month rent there in this place that we stayed in. We never left that place once we got in there at 390 North Oakland, and it was the nicest place we could have found to be happy in was that place. And we never even considered moving all the rest of the time we stayed in Pasadena. So Rex went off, and we had a lot of correspondence, and he went to the China India-Burma Theater with General Stilwell. So I don't really, all I can think of right now is what I did. And that was, I got a job. I had part-time work previously at the Owl Drugstore working for Mr. Manser. Russell worked there in the beginning. And so I had I was hired with no problem. And I worked nights. And that was, you had to work till after the theater crowd, which was the Pasadena Playhouse group, would come into this All Drugstore at their soda fountain and line the counters up, and we didn't get any extra pay for that. That was under the covers. They didn't pay us for any of the extra time, and I have an enormous amount of extra time that the Owl Drug Company owes me because not one penny, and I was making, I think it was $14 a week, and working the night shift, and I had the assistant manager was a sex pervert, and he was always grabbing everybody when he went by them behind the counter, and he was a pill. So it wasn't a nice situation, and I worked there. And in the meantime, they started building that lovely Broadway department store right across the street from our drug store. And as soon as it got going well, I went over and got a job at the Broadway department store, and I left the drug store because it was it wasn't a good place for anybody to have to work at night, and especially when you had I couldn't even go to the restroom downstairs without that creep doing something nasty, exposing himself or whatever. He was just doing, and he was the assistant manager. So anyway, I got liberated by my own smarts and going across the street. And this friend of mine had just gotten a job there, and she was the sister of the boys that founded the Boys Market. And her name was Mildred. Mildred Feinstein. She was Jewish. And she'd graduated from college, and she'd been given every luxury imaginable, because by that time the boy's brother had these big markets going, and she was the baby sister but the axe fell on her. She had to go to work. She had her own car, she had everything, but she had to buy her own gas and she had to pay her own way.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, well, she had a good stiff spine, so she knew what work was.
Okay. Well,
So
anyway, I want to ask more about. Okay, so Dad, where was Dad at this point?
Well, he was over in the China-Burma area with General Stilwell's group.
Okay. No. Where were you when the war started? What do you remember on December 7th?
Well, I was there in Pasadena because we were corresponding with the Sailor family, and Phil was stationed over there.
Uh-huh.
And we got a postcard from him saying all we're doing is sunbathing and waiting for the Japs to attack. That was a week before it happened.
Uh-huh.
And
where was
I
he?
had that postcard for years, and I don't know if still somewhere in my belongings, that and he was a young lieutenant on the boat when they got that surprise attack, and he backed up against under the right, but he couldn't move. He was being shot from the airplanes.
Okay, but so where were you? What were you doing when you heard about the war?
Well, I was working at the All drugstore.
And
that was a great blow to everybody in the area. And then we had to...
What were you doing on that particular day? Like when you heard the news?
I don't remember.
You don't remember, okay.
No.
And where was Dad?
He was in the China-Burma area.
No, I think didn't he just leave Hawaii or something right before that?
Well, he was on the boat behind the Langley. And he just missed getting his boat, they got the Langley in place of his boat.
No.
That was one. He escaped death about 3 or 4 different times in his career overseas.
Is that right?
But he was a member of the Flying Tiger group. Your father was.
He wasn't in the Flying Tigers?
He was a member of the group, and they were called the Flying Tigers. In fact, they had a radio. They notified me to turn on the radio. They were going to talk about my husband and his being in the Flying Tigers, and he gave him his nickname of Handlebar Hawley, and he had already had the interview that they were going to put on the radio.
Okay, so you guys exchanged letters.
Oh yes, I had dozens of letters that had wonderful news in them and the details. Guess what? Your dear little fat-butted Stella, she goes upstairs in that unfinished attic. There was no floor, and it was your father's footlocker was up there, and she gets all those letters, drags them out. She had to bust your butt to get to do it, to carry all those letters that your father had written me, every last one up, and took them out and burned them.
Well,
now you tell me, why would she do such a thing?
I don't know. That's a terrible.
That was pictures, the whole work, and I couldn't believe it. She had to crawl over the unfinished boards. You know how they are in an attic, but the footlocker was up there with all of your father's love letters, everything that she could.
Okay, well, that's kind of moving ahead. So
anyway, that was her.
Let's go back to the war years then. So what did you do in the war years? You worked at the drugstore.
At the drugstore.
And then you worked at Broadway.
There was this wonderful Broadway, brand new, and I was at the drugstore. I was at the counter.
Yeah, and the Broadway you worked
cigarettes. I sold everything in the store. I was there. Well, I suppose a year or so.
And then you worked at the Broadway.
Then I went across the street, and I even got a $5 a week higher pay, and I was in the cosmetic department there at the Broadway.
Okay. And when did Dad come home from the war?
Well, after 27 months from the time he left. We were married October 27th, 1941, and then he was gone. I think it was either 24 or 27 months. So we both had aged 2.5 years later, and he comes home, and Ruth and Leo drove me over to the airport, and we picked him up that night, and he came in, and he'd had a exciting life, being in the Flying Tigers, and that's where a lot of those pictures came. We brought home with him, and we. I was trying to think. We're still right there, North Oakland, living there, and.
And where did Dad go?
Well, then he was stationed back in.
So when Dad was overseas, where did he go?
Well, he went with where General Stilwell was
You
at.
don't remember the names of the countries?
Well, it
or?
was China, Burma. The Stilwell group. He was with them the whole time.
Okay.
And
so then he came back, and he
saved the airplane crew of this. I might as well tell that now.
Mm-hmm.
He flew the hump, carrying supplies into Burma, wasn't it, or China? And the Japanese were bracing for a big deal. So he was on that plane, and that was his regular route to do that, to fly the supplies in over the hump, they called it. And he's I've got kind of mixed up in my mind about it. I've got to think a second.
So he was.
Jog my memory if you can about. He was. I know that was one of the big things that.
Well, the plane was taking off or something like that.
Oh yeah, about the accident.
Yeah.
They were. All of them. They were flying the planes on and off of this rice paddy. And loading them up to fly over the hump, and they did it from this. They had over there in China, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so he was in this plane, and it was overloaded, and it crashed on takeoff. Well, the crew tried to get out through the back door, and it was jammed. They couldn't get out, and your father was. He thought of the escape hatch over the pilot seat, and he was closest to it. So he managed to get it open, and it had to be done in a matter of 5 seconds. They had no time for thinking on anything. They was do or die. So he managed, by using all the strength that comes when you're fighting for your life, he had this brute strength, and he got the door open, and he screamed for the crew to come that way. They were trapped in the back of the plane. They couldn't get out. So he hollered, and he stood by until they all got out, and then he jumped. And he injured his leg. But he managed to stumble over to the side of the rice paddy where the rest of the crew had managed to save their lives. Well, everybody else on the base thought they had died because it happened so fast that the word went out that the plane was lost, and they were all lost. Place of that, there they were standing off to the side of the rice paddy, and by the time they got back, though, the word had circulated. Well, all their personal belongings had been scattered through. Everybody grabbed whatever they had.
Oh no!
It didn't amount to anything. But they were close buddies. So there they were, standing off the side of the plane, and everybody thought they were dead. Well, they were so excited and so thrilled that their buddies had been spared. They couldn't get over the hugging and the squeezing of their friends' arms and whatever. They were overjoyed because they were under such pressure anyway. It was. They were like they were close brothers. It was a very close comrade element they were in.
Didn't Dad win some kind of medal or award for that?
He was supposed to, but they disbanded, and he never got any kind of recognition whatsoever. His friend Mark Critchfield wanted to be a party to it, and there were feelers went out, but nothing was ever said. And he was to have had, because he was the one that saved the crew by opening that escape hatch over the pilot's seat and screaming for him to come. And of course, there was no delaying anybody. That when it's your very life, it's going to go in a split second. And he hadn't any more than jumped out and injured his leg. And he said he just got it. He didn't even get up to where the rest of the crew was when the plane blew up. Yeah, it was all in a matter of 10 or 15 seconds. The whole thing. They were trapped in this burning airplane. Well, anyway, Rex was supposed to have had a medal, and anything ever came of it.
Well, that's too bad.
Well, it's too bad there isn't some kind of something about the story, because that was with General Stilwell's group, and that was that type of a life the whole time. He was on the very last plane to take off when the Japs were landing. They were coming in to land when his plane took off to make their escape from the Japanese. Well, then, I can't remember much more, except he came home after 27 months. And he was much more mature than he was when he left. He was about 23 when he left. He was 25 then.
And so then he was stationed in California?
What?
He was stationed in California after that?
No, we went to Salt Lake City. No.
St. Paul?
No,
St. Paul?
I'm
Minnesota?
trying to think when he got home where we were stationed. You wouldn't think I'd forget that. But we went to this base. We got on a train and we both...
Wasn't it St. Paul?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah.
It wasn't Salt Lake City, it was St. Paul, Minnesota. And that's where we stayed then. We got an apartment, and we lived there till the end of the war, St. Paul.
I heard that, didn't Dad take you up in an airplane once and flew you around?
Oh, yes. The pilot had made a play. He didn't know I was married, and he'd made a play for me before we got connected and greeting each other. The pilot had made eyes or something, wanted me to date him or something, and there it was his mechanic's wife that we all met then afterwards, and he was so embarrassed that this pilot, Critchfield, Mark Critchfield, no, that wasn't it either. I forget his pilot's name. But we all laughed over that.
And you had a good time in St. Paul?
Oh, yes. We had a very nice apartment, and he was, we were there until we moved to Pasadena so your dad could go to college on the GI Bill.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough for this interview, and
Okay.
we'll stop here for now because we're running out of tape.